Okay, I did not anticipate just how excited people were for Xiaomi's €250 Mi A2, and pretty much minutes after posting my unboxing video, I was flooded with comments of people who wanted a camera test. So here it is, and because this camera is so good for the price, we're actually going to be comparing it to not just the OnePlus 6, a phone that is twice as much, but also the Galaxy S9 Plus, a phone that costs more than 3 times as much. Okay, let's kick things off with daylight 4K video. And your first impression is probably, whoa, the Mi A2 keeps up remarkably. And yeah, in terms of color and contrast, it is trading blows with the Galaxy S9 Plus. But really the OnePlus 6 steals the show with its incredible HDR. If you look at the building on the left, you can see that even though it's in the shade, the OnePlus 6 maintains its brightness and detail better than the other two. You might have noticed though that the Mi A2's stabilization isn't quite there. The other two flagship phones managed to pretty much eliminate the slight sway that being a human is going to result in. Again, the OnePlus nails this scene in terms of color, but I was still impressed by the Xiaomi. It's not quite at the S9 Plus's level, but it's close enough for it to be an achievement in its own right. It is less than a third of the price of that phone. All three phones have slow motion capability, and out of the three, I quite like the S9's output. While both this and the OnePlus 6 are at 720p, the Samsung's looks a little sharper and can also record even slower than the OnePlus. But it does have the caveat of not being able to record like this continuously. The OnePlus can. Xiaomi's Mi A2 can't capture nearly as many frames as the other two phones, so its video isn't as slow, but it does keep it at 1080p, so it looks clean. Walking is where you will notice the Mi A2's lack of stabilization. All phones are recording at 4K and Samsung sails through the test, with the OnePlus pretty close behind. See, it looks like at 4K, Xiaomi has either completely turned off electronic image stabilization or dialed it back significantly. It's still pretty solid footage for the price, but this is one area where there is a clear disparity with the higher end phones. At 1080p, Xiaomi does introduce stabilization, but I'll get back to this. What about just straight up daylight photos? Let's have a quick look at the HDR and the color processing on this new Mi A2. And to sum it up in 3 words, it is good. Even side by side with these phones that are 2 and 3 times the price respectively, some would prefer the Mi A2's photos. That's a huge deal. The image processing introduces higher contrast, but in a subtle way so as not to look unrealistic, and it helps to bring out more detail in the sky especially. When you do look at the skies, the S9 Plus is actually the one playing catch-up, with an output that I'd say looks a little soft compared to the other two. Then again, this aspect is personal preference, but I appreciate the slight extra definition from the Xiaomi. With a direct source of light behind, the sun in this case, OnePlus does the best job of still keeping the foreground well lit, but it's a close one and none of them are doing badly. In middling lighting, the Mi A2 loses some of its punch, but not as much as the other two. Surprisingly, it is the least affected by this challenging lighting situation. But when we get to really low light, it's a different story. Let's start with video. I've brightened all 3 images just to exaggerate the grain a little, and you can probably tell the A2 is struggling. OnePlus 6 seems to apply a strange blue filter to low light video now, which must have come through a software update, because it wasn't like that at launch. Nonetheless, video from the 6 is actually the sharpest of the 3, in part due to a slight over-sharpening by the software, but also, it is just capturing a little more detail, even than the S9 Plus. All 3 phones are recording at 1080p here, and you can probably tell Xiaomi's stabilization has now kicked in, and it's making quite a bit of difference. With low-light photos, the Galaxy S9 Plus is a clear winner, as I guess you'd expect given that this is one of the phone's key selling points. Its variable aperture allows it to gather much more light and produce a cleaner photo with visibly less noise. What is interesting though is Xiaomi Mi A2's secondary lens, which is partially there to use in low light. Whilst it does help in dim conditions, when things get really dark, you're actually better off going back to the primary lens. The secondary makes a brighter image, but because of the way it works, which I have explained in my review video, feel free to check that out, I'll leave a card above, you sacrifice in detail. Whilst the Galaxy S9 is so good, it almost looks like you've got a light bulb right behind you, the Mi A2 isn't far off the OnePlus 6. They produce similar quality images in this lighting. Portrait mode, very important to a lot of people, in which the S9 Plus annoyingly has to zoom into the image to take portrait mode photos. More often than not, this is an inconvenience, as you tend not to be able to fit your subject in unless you take a step back. Having said that, this combination of getting closer to objects and the more intense background blur on the S9 give it a more cinematic quality. Both the Mi A2 and the OnePlus 6 are very serviceable though, and the OnePlus 6 is the best at handling dynamic range here. The Mi A2, generally speaking, gets the core image, whatever it is you're focusing on, really well, but then it just loses quite a lot of detail and colour from lighter parts of the background. If you like taking selfies though, Xiaomi's phone really comes into its own. Straight out of the camera, images are punchy, and whilst it is a little heavy-handed on the skin smoothing, I don't think it takes it too far, like some of Huawei's more recent phones. What I really like is the portrait mode from the front camera. All three are about the same in terms of edge detection, i.e. not quite as good as a rear camera but solid, but Xiaomi's images have a consistently vibrant colour profile. Both the A2 and the S9 Plus do suffer from a bit of overexposure though, most likely in the name of beautification, which is fine, but it just means that the OnePlus manages to keep the light areas under control a bit better. Just for fun, I actually tried a super low light selfie, and I'd say the Mi A2 is a clear step ahead. If you look at the t-shirt especially, the stitching has much more definition to it. A quick note on zoom though. This new budget Xiaomi device has had to make some concessions, and one of them is that there is no optical zoom. And actually, the OnePlus doesn't have it either, but that phone can still zoom in 2 times and look clear. Xiaomi struggles with this. The S9 Plus has optical zoom, so there is basically zero loss in quality when zooming in 2 times. And now to answer maybe the most important question of all, which phone takes the most detailed photos? So we've got some texture shots here, and if we zoom in 12 times on each, it's really close. The OnePlus has a little bit more definition due to its 16 megapixel primary sensor versus the 12 megapixel on both other phones. After this, the S9 Plus and Mi A2 are really similar, but Samsung's phone has a little bit less noise and artifacting. Its photos are just a little bit smoother. Okay guys, so a surprisingly close comparison, and really a demonstration that Xiaomi have done a fantastic job on their €250 Mi A2. These flagship phones are more capable, no doubt, but this is the first budget phone ever where I can say there just isn't that much in it. Thanks a lot for watching guys, I really hope you enjoyed the video, and if you're new around here, if you could smash that subscribe button down below, it would really mean a lot to me. My name is Aaron, this is Mr. Who's the Boss, and I'll catch you guys next time.